Shall I try again? We're okay now? Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we turn to our agenda, I want to thank the members who've come today. And I'd also like to ask April to introduce our management fellow. April?
Thank you, Madam Chair. He was unable to be with us at the last meeting, so I wanted to go ahead and introduce him. His name is Evan Price. Evan, you want to stand up? He is on his second rotation through the Management Fellows Program, which many of you are familiar with. His first rotation was at the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, and he did, I always get that wrong, he did a lot of work on enrollment trends and student destinations, and some of which he'll be doing with us. He's got an interest in transportation and a few other areas, so he's doing a number of projects. He graduated from George Mason University in May of 2022 with his bachelor's degree in government and international politics with a concentration in public policy analysis and a minor in data analysis. And he'll be with us through October. So I would hope you'd welcome him to the committee staff.
Welcome, and we look forward to working with you this summer and fall. Thank you for being with us. Okay, next, we'll go back to the agenda, and we'll have a report on the May revenue report from Secretary Cummings. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. For those of you who've had a chance to look at the numbers, you will see quite an unusual month. Once again, I feel like I've had the same opening line about every month this year. But the pass-through entity tax, which has no net impact on the Commonwealth, has created a lot of noise in our numbers. We had assumed that the money that came in December, where you had to pay your taxes, would largely have been rebated back or refunded back by the end of this month of May. That has not been the case. So we have significant numbers that are moving between April and May, and now you'll hear between 2023 and into FY 2024 when final payments are due in November. So that's the big noise that's on top of numbers. I'd say the net is we feel pretty good about where we are. We've got more money in the bank. We remain still cautious about the future. We still believe that we are going to have a delayed recession. There's a lot of debate. I think people have become much more hopeful and optimistic. For those of you who are watching for CPI this morning, the headline CPI was better. It was down in the 4% range. But the core CPI, which is the primary number that is watched, is still at 5.3. So this speculation is the odds of another rate increase in July went up to 68%. This is all kind of immediate reaction. And we'll see, but I'd say that given the language that the Fed continues to use of being data-driven and we have to slay inflation, I think we have to expect that the likelihood of at least one more rate hike is in the future. I think a lot of people think that's nutty, given where we are, but Powell has been steadfast in his commentary around that. So, with that, let's go through economic update, fiscal revenues, and then some of the details and next steps. So, economy continues to perform well. Most importantly, in May, surprisingly strong increase in new jobs, 339,000 new jobs in the month of May. It was really surprising to the upside. What's happening, though, and you'll see this nationally and for Virginia, is that we're seeing a significant growth in low-paying sectors. Kind of the return of the pandemic-impacted service sectors is where all the growth is, and where we're not having the growth is at the more of the higher-end income job categories. Because of that, average wage gains are growing. They're still growing, but at a lower rate than what we had projected. If you looked at where you don't change mix, there's a study on that, I'll show you a chart on that, sorry, that will show that actually wage gains continue to be pretty high, but the overall gross number because of mix has softened. Fed we still believe they will pause in their announcement today, tomorrow actually, sorry, and but we do now expect that likelihood of a rate rises after that. The debt ceiling was a non-event, honestly. I mean, really, we don't not see our economist, Stephen Giacchetti, study this deeply. We were all getting prepared. We were getting ready to lock in as much of the ARPA as we could. And at the end of the day, it's going to have some impact, but really not something that we think will have a meaningful revenue impact for Virginia, particularly for the next 12 to 24 months. Revenue collections exceeded projections meaningfully, $948 million year to date. But as I said, the timing issues are significant, and that we believe that the refunds that will now be pushed into 2024 will offset that number by about $600 million. Last month we said it was 500. Actually, less is being processed. More stuff is coming in later, so that number continues to grow. Here's the chart on mix. I think this is an interesting, actually interesting chart to look at as you look at Virginia versus U.S., not just in growth, but also in our proportionate share in those categories. So you can see the blue box on the middle, those top three lines, are the fastest growing areas. The U.S. Total jobs is right in the middle, which is, it's bracketed around the 2.1% for Virginia. So above the U.S. average for those job categories or below. And you can see that for Virginia in particular, that we've really seen a big bump in the leisure and hospitality and other services. Unfortunately, they are among the smallest average income or wages. And then down below, in the one category where we way out over index, if you go to the far right, professional business, where Virginia has 20% of its jobs versus a U.S. average of 15, you can see not only is it low relative to U.S., but it's particularly low for Virginia. And this is, we're going to come back to this because this is a consistent trend over the last few years, that job classification, which I think we all think of, that's what Virginia is really solid in, Northern Virginia, the professional and business services, that's an important sector, but we've been losing share of that on a national based relative to the national statistics. This shows wage gains, and the red line is what's actually happening, unadjusted for
Mr.
mix.
Secretary, Senator Norman has a question for you.
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was paying attention to the third bullet on your overview, which we talked about the growth in the lower income. But then when we got on page 4, particularly from my part of the world where you're dealing with leisure and hospitality, are any of these numbers seasonally adjusted, or are they amortized like over a 12-month period? Because I can tell you, being in the leisure and hospitality business, this ain't even close.
So,
You wish, right?
if I may, this is a year-over-year number, so it's the same month. So it is, it factors in seasonality. So this is April 2023 compared to April 22.
Okay, thank you.
That's why you see the big number.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay. So this is you can see, I think it's important when you look at the blue line, which is your average hourly wage with keeping mix constant, that actually you're still seeing 6% year-over-year increases in wages, which is still very significant, seeing how that's persisted at that high level for the last year. So jobs still very tight. Job openings remain quite high relative to unemployed. Fed funds, I think you know this, the assets that the Fed has within their system, they have been talking about quantitative easing, and that's what they are trying to employ. A little blip when we had the bank issues back in, a couple months ago, where they did increase their balance sheet, but they're going to continue to let that trickle down. Inflation, just updated this morning. You can see here that trimmed down mean PCE. That is the number that is most closely watched by the Fed. That doesn't come out until later this month. We're going to add now on the CPI, all items, that's dropping down to 4%, so everyone would celebrate, think that's a great move. But what's not on here, and Stephen, I'm realizing we got to get core CPI on, is that core CPI is still at the 5.3, which was what it was last month as well. And that is excluding food and energy. And because of that, shelter becomes a much bigger piece of the number, and shelter actually has held steady. And I think I'm hearing that just anecdotally, that people are not seeing the real pullback in housing prices that was expected with the rate environment. This is really important. This is the share of consumption spent on goods versus services. And you can see we went into lockdown with COVID, that second quarter of 2020, and Amazon trucks started flying all over the world delivering stuff and doing home renovations. And so we really moved away from the average of what represented goods versus services. And we're looking forward much more now, getting ready to look at what happens next year. But we have a view that we will end up back at that kind of services representation to get goods back in that high 20% range, kind of 27, 28, over the next several quarters. One data point that would suggest there's more action out there, and again, as we talk to people, it does feel like people are staying in their jobs now more tightly, that they're not job hopping as much, and we are seeing this uptick in claims for unemployment that happened in the last month, which that the degree to which it did move up was a bit of a surprise. So that's something we got to watch, and I think just indicates maybe, as we read in the paper, more pressure around that. So on the collection side, again, May it's a really affected month by the PTET. So if I can quickly go through this, and then we got to look more at year-to-date numbers, frankly. So, but relative to the December forecast, where we had that built in, and a very conservative, prudent outlook, general fund revenues are ahead by $948 million through May. We've added like $440 million in May, and driven mainly by the non-withholding collections. Just as an aside, versus the Chapter 769, we're $2.3 billion ahead. We just want to reference that given where we stand with our budget. May revenues significantly impacted by PTET. A lot of things were pushed from May to April because of the April 17th filing deadline for PTET, but things continue to drag out a bit more, and that explains the significant variance. Unexpected strength in non-withholding. So below all that, non-withholding actually has outperformed our assumption in our model. So we have done better. There is some good news in the midst of that. So offsetting that strength in non-withholding, though, withholding was somewhat lower down to the last bullet by about $41 million. We think that does reflect the mix affecting Virginia a bit. And sales tax revenues have been pretty meaningfully below. And that reflects the unexpected move back on the goods versus services, where we are not taxing that base. So that will be an issue for us to continue to watch going forward. Corporate tax revenue actually was surprising. It's been quite strong, and that's exceeded the year-to-date by $112 million. It's not that big an overall contributor. And then interest income, where we had a very conservative view, obviously, that's come in 3x what we had in the budget. So those things just help us offset some of the other things that have created some pressure. So unadjusted, the month is 3.4%. Year-to-date for total general fund revenues down, and in May, for the reasons PTET, is down 21.3%. But that's not really a relevant number given those timing issues. This is the chart that we want to focus on. As you all know, we've really shifted since we created in our forecast smart monthly forecasts. Unfortunately, some of these things have moved around on us, but that actually helps us analyze it more readily when things move from what we assumed. We look at our actuals versus projected, and that variance, it gets you to the 450 in May, and if you go over to year-to-date, that third column on the right side, that's your 948. That's where we stand versus our budget, which leads to the $3.6 billion of excess revenues at the end of the year that were part of the governor's introduced budget. And then you can see relative to prior year that we are down $3 billion versus in total GF for May, and we are down. I'm sorry, no, that's not right. That's the prior year. I'm sorry. We're down 21% in May, given the timing issues, but year to date we're down only 3.4%. This is the traditional chart, which is showing us unadjusted numbers on the top, and then the bottom some adjusted revenues to get an indication of economically what's happening in some of the key categories. And that's where you see on the up top May, the 22, 23, and the percent change, they're down 21%. And then if you go over to the right, on the fiscal year to date, they're down 3.4%. And it is primarily accounted for within the non-withholding that drives those numbers. You can see huge variations in that year over year. Again, thanks to PTET. Down below adjusted withholding, the percent change, the fourth column is positive 8.6 for the month of May, and year to date is positive 6.7. And then going down for sales, fourth line down, you can see we're down 2.8% for the month of May, and year to date we are down up 3.1. So a little bit of softness in the recent month. Here are charts showing you the main categories, and the red line is the official forecast target. We do think on this we are going to come in a bit below that, given the recent experience that we will inevitably likely lead to the similar outcome in June, and but not too far off. This is non-withholding. You can see the massive move of revenues coming from May into being pulled into April. Our number had showed $826 million in April, but that is the 413 of that would have otherwise been received in May. On the non-withholding, we are about 25% lower than we were in 2022. That is better than we had expected. We had something on the order of 35% in the model that we built. We hit that one, I think, as you may recall, in our governor's budget. We hit that one hard, given the significant uncertainty, and the market's been better than we expected, so that's good news. And we've done better than we expected, and better than the U.S. average, about 35%. One of the things, and this is now in support of the $600 million moving into the next fiscal year of additional refunds that should take place this year going into next year. And this shows you Virginia is one of just a few states who have just enacted the PTET. Many other states enacted it a year earlier. So it's the second, like it's happening for us. Those states generally had better outcomes than they expected in the first year, and then more negative outcomes in the second year for reasons similar to what we're experiencing ourselves. And when Stephen built the projection for next year, it was based upon an expectation that we would end up in a place that looks more like the U.S. average, which is that 35, 38%, and that drives the $600 million expectation of a economic hit in the November of this coming year. And again, it's a timing issue. This is just some quotes you can read later from other states that were actually surprised by that second year. I think you've probably read a lot from other states on, frankly, I think poor budgeting. I do believe that we did a good job of building a forecast that took a conservative view of things. And in fact, a research piece that came out talking about state economies and the concerns about where they stood, did call out Virginia in saying that we talked relative to forecast, and we had embedded into that an expectation of some negative impacts, whereas other states were just taken last year and basically doing the budgeting off of that. So I think we all should feel good that we are in a really good spot for whatever might come. And I think our mantra has been that plan for a more difficult time and hope for something better, and we still stick by that. Refunds here you can see in May total $193 million. They've exceeded projections by $84 million. A lot of things going on here that are part of the policies that were implemented, the one-times, standard deduction increase, expanded EITC, the military retirement subtraction. So a lot of things that contributed to this, and that's what drives the growth by $84 million. Sales tax, this is the one that frankly, I will say we missed. This was that movement in migration to services versus goods was something that was more meaningful than anybody expected. And so that's something that as we look now building the next year revised forecast with which we can start to plan what our upcoming reports will be based upon is something we're going to have to dial back on. But the good news is we have offsets with corporate tax and with better interest income that's exceeded expectations, which I've covered here. Corporate taxes are surprisingly strong. We see that. We're not expecting that's going to continue to have this kind of growth, but it feels pretty solid right now. Deed recordation is still weak, and then other revenues of 216, which is largely positive due to a interest rate income, which is 3x what we had projected in a very conservative forecast. So we feel good about where we are. Again, the non-withholding is, we think, going to hang in there, going to be better than expected. We've provided for the increase that's going to come in November as the things get cleaned up with final payments. Other major sources, sales and deed recordation will be adjusted as we update our forecast. Withholding is a bit behind, but not terribly behind, and we'll consider that. And then we have the other sources that we do believe will largely offset those things. So bottom line is we feel good about where we are. I'd say the incremental money, last month we said we beat by about $500 million. We estimated that the final payment was going to be at $500 million. We said, let's keep that in the cookie jar. What we feel now is that we've got more money in the bank, and we believe that is the 500 went to 600, but that incremental excess is stuff that we still believe is something, given the uncertainty and our belief that we still have a reasonable chance of a delayed recession, that we should feel really good about where we are, that we are ready for it with an appropriate cushion. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Are there questions for the Secretary? Yes, Senator Norman.
Mr. Secretary, while I'm not on the front line, rumor has it that at some point discussions will continue on dealing with the budget amendments to the biennium budget, and there seems to be at least a discussion going on between the House and the Senate on various approaches, and you've indicated that you feel pretty good about where we are. Has anything changed based upon this empirical financial information that you have before us that has amended the position of the administration on tax relief or suggested moderation? A real softball.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We feel really good about where we are. I think that we feel like we couldn't be in a better spot to have the right conversation with the cushions for things that we think create more uncertainty. A month ago, we all had the uncertainty of the debt ceiling. That was the big unknown. That's been resolved. Economy, if you listen to the economists more broadly, actually they're they're pretty optimistic. If it's a touch and go kind of a recession for a lot of people, we're still concerned with rates, and that some of these things could turn into something that is not terrible, but a bit more challenging. So we got money in the bank to deal with those unexpected things. We think we're prepared for what could be a worse outcome than the world believes, and based upon that, we still have confidence that we have the resources to be able to execute on the plan. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Deeds.
I want to understand, you said you had concern about the rates, and the talk of recession has been going for months, and it's gotten, a weaker recession has been projected all, from your vantage point, the last few times you've been here. What concern about the rates do you think are going to take us toward recession? I mean, I thought the rates were basically being elevated to decrease inflation, and decrease the chances of inflation, and I think they've worked.
I agree with you. Inflation is down, but it is not, the Fed says, Jerome Powell says that we need to see inflation back at that 2 to 3% level. We're a long ways off of that still. And everybody has been doubting whether or not he's going to stick to his guns and continue to raise rates, when everybody will say, why are you doing this? You run the risk of really triggering a major recession. In order to defeat inflation, you've got to start to impact supply and demand, which means you've got to impact jobs. And we have not seen that yet, and this will be a real test of will for Powell on whether or not he really will stick to it, because the world is saying, why would you ever do more? Is that there's that impact, it's a trailing to the rate increase, the impact is a long tail to it. And so things are already in motion that are impacting things with just higher rates. We've got a world that hasn't had high cost of borrowing for 10 years. And you can see it, the most obvious is commercial real estate. That's going to be a train wreck, office commercial real estate. And I think you're starting to see the trickle of those things. I think actually they thought there would be more impact on housing. That's probably one of the most troubling things, is that with mortgages now 2 to 3x in cost of where they were, and housing's remaining strong, and housing starts are still shockingly strong, frankly. I think there's an argument that more needs to be done, and then the risk level goes up. So we haven't gotten more negative. We've just said the shape of the recession we had, there's a little wedge in our projection line of GDP. We just shifted that out and said we still want to stick to our guns and saying let's plan for that and hope that it's something better.
Anyone else? Well, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very,
Appreciate it.
very informative.
Thank you.
Okay, next up will be Cheryl Roberts, the Director of DMAS, and she'll provide an overview of the program updates, including Medicaid eligibility. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. This way, Mike?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, good morning. I'm Cheryl Roberts, as you said. I'm the Director for Medicaid. I'm going to give you a couple of updates, and you're going to meet some of the people that's on our executive team. So I'm not going to try to be the expert of everything. See if it works. Good. I always like to talk about now, to explain that DMAS is in 3 parts. One part is that we're very member-centric focused. That's the piece that provides the services to people. So that's the thing that most people think of us. But we're also a big operation. Most people don't think about all the things that we do to actually make those things happen. So I like to acknowledge that. And then obviously we're accountable for both the money as well as making sure the program runs strongly. And so today, that's one of the reasons I brought the 3 people. The member-centric piece, you're going to meet our CMO, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Lisa Price-Stevens. She's going to talk about weight loss drugs. You're going to meet Sarah Hatton, who is our deputy for both eligibility and coverage, and she's going to talk about the unwinding. That will be the bulk of our discussion today. And then, of course, we're going to have our CFO, Chris Gordon. He'll talk about the finances a little bit, about rates, okay? This is what we look like right now. Children are still dominant, but Barely, okay? So basically because of the Medicaid expansion, we have a lot of adults. We look healthy and good. We are still big on pregnant women, and we still have a big disability population, obviously. But it's interesting to watch our case mix change as the populations are changing. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the unwinding, because that actually comes up. We have 3 priorities for 2023. I go my 3 for 2023. Clearly the unwinding. That's the number 1 issue. Obviously, trying to get everyone to have re-eligibility in less than a year or in a year is obviously the big challenge. The second one, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. That's what we're trying to do. We're working with DSS. We've already started in March. We started all the processes, we did the trainings, but Sarah's going to spend a lot of time explaining what we did and where are we. Because I guess the question you want to know is a snapshot of where are we today and what the challenges are, because we are going to need help from everyone in order to make that work. So I do tell everyone from the beginning that if you know anyone on Medicaid or anyone who influences anyone on Medicaid, please remind them they do have to do renewals. Because of the way the expansion worked with the pandemic, there are people who came on that never had to do a renewal before. So this is new. And as I say, I tell this to everyone, young people do not open up envelopes. So trying to get them to do that is going to be our challenge, but we are going forward trying to get them open. Second project is obviously the governor's number 1, which is behavioral health. This is Right Help and Right Now. There's 6 tiers, as you see there. We're involved in almost all of it. The crises, obviously, is important to us. Law enforcement, less for us. Capacity is important, actually, as we're working. We have an arts program that actually works with substance abuse. We are working on the workforce, because that's an issue for us, too. And our big piece is, obviously, we're doing services. We are the biggest provider of behavioral services in the Commonwealth. And the other one, the third, is the procurement. As you know, in October, my boss, the Secretary of HHR, announced that we were going to reprocure. And people asked the question, didn't you just reprocure? The answer is no. We reprocured, ironically, in 16 and 17. And I looked it up, and that was an iPhone 6. So wherever you were, we are far from there. So this is an opportunity to see all the things that have been done nationally, all the things that have changed, and see that and actually regroup and actually do a new focus. Some of the things people will see is obviously behavioral health is going to be a big issue because, again, that's the big difference between the last 10 years. I mean, there's lots of things that have changed. So there's an opportunity to do that. We hired a consulting group, Boston Consulting Group, so that we would see what the best of the nation is. And so what they do is they actually show us. They said, this is what all the states are doing. That's good, where their outcomes are. And so in some ways, it was like doing a menu. It was a great experience for us. So we hope to release the RFP this summer. And we hope to implement next summer, and that will bring together both our delivery systems, be at ease to the providers. That's one of the things providers have been complaining about, having the separate programs. So, yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the earlier slide where in the left-hand corner you have Right Help Right Now, I'm particularly interested in the second column. Of course, it's dealing with behavioral health. We must relieve the law enforcement community's burden while providing care and reduce the criminalization of behavioral health. What is the protocol that you anticipate that would provide for intervention prior to a catastrophic situation where the behavioral health issues have not been previously addressed?
There's a team that works on that. This is not necessarily DMAS's on DMAS's lead, but talking about TDOs and, like you said, what can we do ahead of time so that we can actually seek help crises so that it wouldn't occur. Obviously, as you know, we have a TDO crisis. I mean, we have police officers who now are picking up people who, that's really not what we should be doing. What we should be finding a way is to, like you said, to identify it ahead of time, which is why the number 1 has to be important. What can we do, not only on crises, but what we can do to prevent the crises? And that's what the work is as we work on the next 3 years. But Michael, I would suggest that we can have a discussion on Right Help Right Now, and we can bring a group together to talk to you about what they're doing there.
Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Deeds.
Ma'am, isn't it true that that's really tied up in the budget proposal that the governor made in January, I guess, or December, that's still subject to negotiation in the conference committee?
Okay, that's good. Yes, sir.
Senator Marsden.
Thank you. Do you have a sense as to what the pipeline looks like in terms of behavioral health workers, in terms of those in school looking for jobs, the job market? Because all the best plans in the world are really tough are tough to enact if you don't have the workforce to do it. How does that look? Do you have a general sense of how that market is?
What I'm going to suggest, Senator, is that we bring that group together because they have all the statistics, and I didn't bring those, but I can get that answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Senator Barker.
just a quick question for you, or a comment and a question. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Commissioner Smith.
Okay, good.
And one of the things we discussed was the extraordinary success of the arts program, which is rated among the top in all states across the country. And we've not always been that good on these types of programs. But one of the things I think that we need to look at is whether we can do things, put together a proposal for behavioral health that could be a mirror image of what we have on the substance abuse situation through the arts program and the things. I think that's one of the things we need to start looking at.
As you know, we're very proud of the arts program. You're right. We get a lot of accolades for it, and we build upon it. You may see some things on our wish list for it too, but we are proud of that. And I will give credit in that the work that they're doing in HHR across the board with all of us, the fact they're bringing all of us together is a good sign, right? And we're still going to see good synergy there. Okay, I talked about that. It's time to talk to Chris.
Thank you, Director Barber.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. So I have two slides to go over. The first is just talking about the draft rates, Medicaid rates, for going into this fiscal year FY24. So there are 13 numbers on this slide deck, but I would draw your attention to the one at the bottom because I just want to get to the punchline first. DMAS is looking at a total fund savings of about $130 million in capitation rates going into this fiscal year. So that's the big number I want to pay attention to, and then I'm going to tell you why now with the other 12 numbers on top. So currently, right now for this fiscal year, we pay $387 a month in capitation payments. Those are basically monthly payments to our health insurance organizations in the acute care column. Acute is basically for kids, the folks that Director Roberts just noted, healthy adults, people with Medicaid expansion, for instance. They have lower needs. That compares with the MLTSS, which basically stands for long-term services and supports. Those are folks that are in nursing homes or home-based community care that have like home care health aides that support them. So that's our rates for this year. Looking forward right now to FY24, our draft rates are dropping $6 for the acute care population, and they're dropping $4 for the LTSS population. That may not seem like a lot, $6 and $4 a month, but when you multiply that by all of the member months, we have 2 million people in Medicaid right now, and you'll hear about the unwinding initiative from Deputy Hatton in a moment. But that's still savings. That's significant savings, and that's where the $130 million comes from. Explaining why that differs from our forecast that we published back in November is we looked at what we thought the member months were going to be back in November. And what we thought the public health emergency was going to end back in January. Well, that didn't happen. It didn't really end until April 1st. And so we had that many more people to come into the program. So on the acute side, there's an actual increase of $127 million, more than what we thought. But that is more than offset by the reduction in member months in our long-term services and support population. That's where you're getting the $130 million savings. All that to say, in the last slide that I'll speak on, is that while we do have that $130 million in savings, that is contingent and pending on 33 rate Medicaid impact budget amendments that are under consideration by you as well as the House. There is a total on the House side of 24 budget amendments. 15 are medical, 2 of which are administrative. And for your body, there are 37 budget amendments that affect Medicaid, 18 of which are medical rate increases, and 13 of which are admin. The highest of those on your side of the House is a $126 million increase, which is predicated on a 12% increase given to personal care attendants. So if any of those proceed, that would largely eliminate the reduction. So lest you're, I'm going to borrow a phrase from my boss, lest your lying eyes deceive you, yes, for the first time in 4 years that I've been the CFO, we are projecting a reduction that, again, is contingent on essentially nothing, you adopting none of the amendments, which obviously is your prerogative. So what does that mean? If there is action on the Appropriation Act, because as Secretary Cummings mentioned before, we always look at, worst case scenario, like if something happens or doesn't happen. We have to plan for every possible scenario. If something happens in the Appropriation Act after July 1st, we will have to reprocess claims, essentially, if the action is taken such that the rate increase is effective on July 1st. If this body sees fit to delay some of those rate increases until, let's say, perhaps October, you would reduce the impact of administrative reprocessing. All that to say is the administrative reprocessing is essentially a fancy term for voiding and reprocessing claims. And that would essentially cost DMAS $180,000 total funds and administrative funds that we obviously don't have. But if, again, the body was interested in moving some of those rate increases down the road, perhaps to FY24 quarter 2, that would help eliminate some of that reprocessing fee so that DMAS could, in fact, get all of the numbers in order, load all the rates in the system, and be ready to go. That's all I have to speak on. Any questions, Madam Chairwoman?
Are there questions?
All right, I will turn it over to Sarah. Deputy Hatton to speak on unwinding. Deputy Hatton.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Hatton. I'm the Deputy for Administration. I'll cover first with you a brief background of unwinding and how we got to where we are today. So in March of 2020, with the public health emergency, we were asked not to take any adverse or negative actions on any individuals that were enrolled in the Medicaid program from March 2020 until the end of the public health emergency. In exchange for doing this, states received a 6.2% enhanced FMAP. In December of 2022, the Consolidated Appropriations Act was passed, which decoupled those continuous coverage requirements from the public health emergency. And it also provided for a step-down FMAP through the end of this year. So in December, that FMAP will eventually be phased out. Since the start of the public health emergency in March of 2022, we saw the rolls in Medicaid grow from 1.5 million individuals to almost 2.2 million individuals. So we had a 41% increase in our enrollment, pretty substantial. And with the decoupling of the public health emergency and that date certain that states were given to begin the unwinding process or the redetermination of everyone enrolled in the program, we actually started this effort at the end of March, with the first closures occurring in April. So as you can see here, to date, we have processed a little over 340,000 of the redeterminations. When the packets were mailed out, the first group of packets that were mailed out in the first redeterminations at the end of March, those were for the month of May. So the first closures could occur in April, but the first renewal due date was in the month of May. Something that's significant on this slide that I do want to point out is that prior to the public health emergency, at the bottom you'll see there were about 32,000 cases per month were processed. And then if you look towards the top of this slide at the number of paper packets mailed each month, you'll see in the first month, March, we intentionally didn't want to flood our local departments of social services or Cover Virginia, our vendor who's helping with this effort, with too many redeterminations as they were easing back into this process that they hadn't done in almost 3 years. But during the months of April and May, you'll see that that substantially increases. And that's because some of these cases are now so old, they can't be picked up through our normal automated process, which would help with some of this work for them. So more paper packets are being mailed. That puts more onus on individuals to return the paper packets. If they don't, they're at risk of losing coverage. And it's also a much higher work volume for the local departments of social services across the state. In order to help them, we did do a contract modification with Cover Virginia. That's our central processing center and call center for Medicaid. In that contract modification, we're temporarily working with them over the course of the next year to take about a third of those redeterminations. Only a certain type they're allowed to process, and those are families and children's cases that don't have any other benefit programs, such as SNAP or TANF. So they are doing that work now, and they are answering calls to help support the local agencies. So as you can see, we've been watching the closures very closely to see what's happening. One of the major things that Virginia and a lot of other states were worried about moving into these redeterminations was the fact that we hadn't had a lot of contact with some members for 3 years. So we were worried about having updated addresses, not being able to reach them, individuals who had never been enrolled in the program before, not being aware that they had to complete an annual redetermination process or that they actually had to take action to make something happen. So we have been very careful in our outreach approach. We've pushed really hard over the past 2 years for the first year during 2022, we were really pushing to encourage everyone to update their addresses. And then that was followed by our phase 2 outreach of pushing to make sure individuals were aware that they had to take action and complete a redetermination if they got a packet. So as you can see here, there are some interesting numbers. So since we began the redetermination, about 53,000 individuals have lost coverage. However, almost 40% of those were for reasons that we were still continuing to close individuals even during the public health emergency. And those reasons include the individual became deceased, they moved from the state of Virginia, or they asked to have their coverage closed. Those were the only 3 reasons why we could continue closures during the public health emergency. Our age blind and disabled population, about 72% of those you'll see were also related to deceased status or loss of Virginia residency. And then, of course, we have our children category. Our largest group that's losing coverage is actually our adult category, and that's primarily going to be expansion adults. This is where we expected to see the most coverage loss. We are, hoping here, and we're monitoring this pretty closely, but we are hoping here that this is related to a lot of the good stories. These are folks who lost their jobs at the beginning of the public health emergency, potentially were able to regain employment, have access to insurance elsewhere, and no longer need the coverage. So one of the major closure reasons that we're following is that failure to complete the renewal. And that is really important for individuals to complete this step, because if they do not complete their renewal process, we don't have the ability to refer them to the marketplace for a subsidized coverage. And that's because we have to make a Medicaid redetermination first. So it's hard to know if someone doesn't respond, if it's because they don't need the coverage, or if it's because they didn't get the packet in the mail, or if they don't understand what they need to do or need additional assistance. Thankfully, CMS has given us an additional 90 days after someone loses coverage from not completing their renewal to go back and do that redetermination and make them whole back to the date in which they lost coverage if they're still eligible. So we do have a lot of work that we're doing in terms of outreach to make sure this doesn't happen. As you can see, about 25% of the losses so far have been due to failure to complete the renewal process. We are working really closely with our 6 health plans to make sure we're pushing that message to individuals, the importance of doing this, so they receive text, phone, email, and mail alerting them that the renewal is due somewhere between a month and a half and 2 months prior to it even being due. And then if an individual does not complete the redetermination process, they also get another form of outreach through all modalities, again from the health plans, encouraging them to complete that process. If they do lose coverage, they get another round of outreach. If they lose coverage because they're no longer eligible due to income or resources, the plans will reach out to them to make sure they have other coverage, help them to make a transition to a commercial plan if necessary. If they didn't complete the renewal packet and that's the reason for the loss, they will get outreach again and offered assistance to help them complete that redetermination process in that 90 days after coverage loss. For our age blind and disabled population, there's even another round of outreach tucked into there because we do want to make sure that folks that are in nursing facilities receiving personal care or hospice, we really don't want them to lose coverage and that ability to access service. So we're reaching out to them again. A person's actually calling them and offering them that assistance to complete their renewal packets.
Senator Norman.
I'm interested in your explanation about the persistent outreach where you're not getting compliance or returns. What is the cost of that?
With their health plans?
No, what is the administrative cost of repeatedly reaching out on phone calls, emails, mailing, personal contact?
There's not an additional cost to us, Senator. The health plans did already perform outreach to our members, so this is a continuing process. We are doing more, but the health plans are not charging us anything additional to do this outreach.
Madam Chairman, somebody's absorbing the cost of the personnel that are doing this. I find that an obfuscation, very candidly.
I would say, Senator, I think that it's probably to the benefit of the plans not to lose these individuals who are enrolled. So I think that everyone is pushing as hard as they can to make sure they don't lose coverage.
Senator Norman.
The bottom line is you can't quantify what the cost of the persistent outreach is. Is that true?
No, sir. To DMAS, there hasn't been an additional cost.
Oh, Senator Eben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we tracking if the people with closed coverage have other health insurance or qualify for other coverage on the exchange?
Yes, sir, we do where we can, but that's really difficult for us to know. It's a question we're asked a lot where people go when they leave Medicaid coverage, and that's often difficult for us to know. When we refer them to the federal marketplace, we are able to get data around how many actually enroll in a marketplace plan. It is really hard for us to get. SSIO doesn't freely share that information with us, so we do have to push to ask for it, but we can't do a one-to-one match of who moved over. We have been working very closely with the new state-based exchange, which is coming up this fall. And so we hope to have a better handle on that. And we know they've been a really good partner with us in unwinding. So we hope that we're going to have more data around what happens to folks when they leave Medicaid coverage.
Thank you. And as a follow-up,
Yes, Senator Eben.
if someone's income disqualifies them for coverage on Medicaid, but we think they can go on the exchange, do we refer them to someone who's going to help them enroll in the exchange, or is that kind of a do-it-yourself thing?
It's mostly a do-it-yourself. We do provide assistance with connecting individuals, and we provide information in our packets when we make that referral to connecting with a navigation counselor to help them with the process. And then the federal marketplace does also reach out to them as well. So if someone were to specifically ask us for that assistance, we could make a direct connection, but we do give them the information to get assistance if they need it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to touch on really quickly our language and disability access, we are working very hard to make sure that all individuals who are enrolled in the program are able to read the material, that are able to process the material in the language that they speak or with any type of auxiliary aids that they may need. So we are all of our unwinding toolkits and outreach material for legislators, providers, members, advocates, everything is translated into the top 5 languages that are spoken by individuals enrolled in the Medicaid program, which accounts for over 99% of our members. We also include information about the ability of language assistance, auxiliary aids, and other services should an individual need that. And then finally, all of our call centers are equipped to assist with translation or interpretation services in 17 languages, actually all languages, and we provide taglines to information with all of our notices and letters in 17 languages, the top 17 that are spoken in the state of Virginia. And then finally, as a reminder, we have a couple of dashboards that are available for everyone's use. We do have an unwinding dashboard, which will allow you to track the number of individuals that have been redetermined, those that have been closed, those that have continued coverage. And then we also have our legislator resource and information page can be found on our DMAS website, where there's toolkits and other material that could be helpful, as well as our new dashboard that's available with enrollments by the new districts. And that is all of the slides from me, if there aren't any further questions.
Further questions? Don't see any. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Price-Stevens.
You're welcome. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman.
Good morning.
So I would like to talk to you today about a hot topic, and that is weight loss medications. I'm sure that all of us have been impacted in some way by the new surge in availability of treatments for weight management. So there's a medication called GLP-1. That stands for glucagon-like peptide. That is a medication that has been FDA approved for several years for diabetes, but now more recently has received FDA indication for weight loss. So as diabetics were taking this medication, they began to lose weight. Someone said, wow, what's going on here? They did further investigation to find out that this medication is sending a signal to the brain to say, you're full. So that's how the medication works. Two big notables about this medication, that it's very effective. When you look at other traditional weight loss medications, there's usually a 3 to 5% weight loss found in that treatment. But with these new medications, there's now a 12 to 18% weight loss realized. Another notable is that it's very costly. When you look at traditional weight loss medications, the cost is usually $100 to $300 per month, roughly. But with the new GLP-1 medications, the cost is $1,300 to $1,500 per month. So a significant difference. Yeah. But the challenge is, I agree. But the challenge is the balance between having access, quality of care, and cost. We know that obesity is a concern nationally in the state of Virginia and with our Medicaid recipients. You know, the downstream complications of hypertension, stroke, heart disease, joint disease, it's all there. So we know that it's something that has to be addressed. Nationally, billions of dollars are lost in wages due to obesity. People can't do their activities of daily living, they can't get to work. We also have national studies that show that for every dollar invested in weight loss, there is a $17 to $18 savings in med costs. So we know that this is an issue that we have to address. But we will not discount that the foundation of weight loss is healthy diet and exercise. Everyone who is obese doesn't necessarily need to be on weight loss medication. And at DMAS, we're trying to find out who are the people who would benefit more from these medications and who are the ones who can use some of the traditional medications. Everyone making sure that we look at the foundation of weight loss being diet and exercise. So we currently have a service authorization for weight loss medications. For that service authorization, it basically would give access to about 42% of our population for those who are overweight and those who are obese. Meaning that if you are overweight and you have several comorbidities and you've tried other modalities for weight loss and failed, then you would have access to the traditional medications. Our current service authorization includes this GLP-1 class. We have made changes to that authorization. Through studying over the last 6 months, looking at what the research has shown, we know that people with class 3 or the most severe obesity really gain the most benefit out of these medications when you look at long-term effects. So in our current authorization, our partners, MRSA, have estimated about a $35 million cost expenditure that was unplanned before these medications were FDA approved for weight loss. With our new authorization, we are separating out GLP medications where only class 3 obesity patients would get this, but also they should have tried and failed traditional medications. And also we're asking for more documentation from the providers showing that the person has been engaged in a weight loss program. that they have had nutritional counseling from a registered dietitian, not just hearsay, but we need documentation for that. So with these changes, we expect a 10% reduction in our expenditure and also the utilization, because now we're honing on these very important medications to those who would gain most from being on them. So we are continuing to monitor the landscape. I just want to say there's 4 new classes coming out. This conversation may not even be a big deal in another 6 months. There's new medications out, and we can only imagine what the cost and the price tag may be attached to them. But it is our mission to make sure that folks get the treatment they need, that there's quality care given, but also that there is cost consciousness and efficiency in the treatment that we help our beneficiaries receive. So I'll stop there. Lots of slides that I just, here for your, well.
We've got them.
You have the deck, the slides are there. We plan to implement this July 1st. We work with our stakeholders and our health plans, and we will keep you abreast of the progress on these weight loss medications.
Great. Senator Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Not that you can ever rely upon anything that the Fourth Estate puts in the public arena, but there's certainly discussions about the abuse of this medication. And what protocols are you all anticipating putting in place to monitor and make sure that there's not abuse of the medication in spite of your best interest in what you're trying to do?
Thank you for that very important question. Well, it's the standard authorization that's there. In order to get authorization, get your insurance company, whether through the MCOs or fee-for-service, to pay for this, you have to meet certain criteria. We have to have documentation that you are class 3 obese. Not that you're a little overweight or even class 1 or 2, that you're class 3, which is severe, can be very life-threatening, of course. The other thing is that we have to have documentation that other modalities have been tried. You're not just checking the box, but you have to bring that this person has been in counseling for 6 months, for example. And then I think the third one that I think is very important is that we want you to have tried some other traditional medications first, documentation of that, not just checking the box, so that we make sure that we're getting the folks who are most severe, who would most benefit at this time from that medication. There is a concern that there may be some diversion, and because this is a diabetes medicine, right? So people could say, oh, well, they have diabetes. No, you have to bring us documentation, lab work proof that this person has diabetes if you're going to be using it for that reason and not weight loss. So we're putting all those guardrails in. We'll continue to evaluate, to look at the data to see that and do audits to make sure that the right population is receiving the treatment. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, Senator Barker.
Yes. Just a quick question here. Of the 5 plans that we have that are functioning with Medicaid now, and are any or all of those plans, are they doing it to the people that they have in their private market?
So, Senator, let me make sure I hear the question. So are the managed care plans that we're working with, not only are they offering this medication to their Medicaid population, but are they also offering the same medication to their commercial plans or their Medicare plans? And so that varies among the plans. It's interesting, when we look at the data, there's actually some populations in different plans that have more obese people than others. So I think that they come from a different standpoint when they look at what that expenditure would be. So it varies. Some plans are offering with a service authorization for all of their lines of business, and some are not. Everyone is still evaluating, looking at national data, and thankfully many of our plans are national plans, so they're able to pull data from other states as well. So we're still working together to learn on how to approach this, but it's a very good question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's one that we probably should monitor.
Yes.
Certainly.
Further questions? Thank you so much.
Okay, so you got to meet my team, which I'm hoping you enjoyed. So we have to recap. I just want to make sure I have down that we should be able to talk to you again about Right Help Right Now. So we'll do that another time. I talked to the secretary. When you asked a question about cost of outreach, we'll get you that question. We'll get you that answer about what does it cost. You asked the questions about third-party liability insurance. We'll give you some information. And then we'll keep you abreast on the weight loss drugs. Yes, we saw utilization trend up. This is what drove it. As we started seeing that come up, the plans agreed to do it with us, so everyone will be aligned. So it won't be like we're off and they're doing something different. All of Medicaid will be one, so that will help. Okay, any questions for me?
Questions? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, we have one final item, and that's the College Partnership Lab Schools, and we're going to be hearing from the Department of Education, Dr., is it Raleigh or
Raley.
Raley?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you, and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to spend a few moments with you today. It's a pleasure to be able to share some of the positive work that's happening related to lab schools here in the Commonwealth. As a former division superintendent of 10 years in two different local school divisions, I always took pride in providing multiple opportunities for students and their families to reach their ultimate academic goals. And that's something that we worked hard in those two school divisions. And I'm thankful now to have the opportunity to be a part of this work as the Chief of Staff at the Virginia Department of Education. Today's presentation is very timely, given that we are coming to a close on graduation season. We have students across the Commonwealth who are finishing their 13-year career as graduates of their local high schools. And so if you think about the multiple pathways that we've taken individually to get to where we are now, and we think back to when we were in high school, it may have been a little windy road. It may have been full of twists and turns and ups and downs, but ultimately we got to where we are, and students are going to graduate from high school. And so college partnership lab schools are just another pathway for students to follow ultimately to get to where they want to be post-high school as they accomplish their lifelong goals. So a few updates. There's a lot of interest right now in lab schools across the Commonwealth, and so positive to share with you today is that we have interest in every region across the Commonwealth. We have full-fledged applications that are currently being considered. We have approved planning grant applications. We have applicants and business partners and institutes of higher education that are working together to think about what the application may look like, but there are opportunities potentially available for students in every region across this Commonwealth. Ultimately, in time, we'd love to have a greater saturation rate where we have opportunities available in more communities than you see on this map, but this is a great start given where we are at this point in time in our work. Right now, we have 2 full-fledged applications that are being considered by the Standing Committee. Those applications are partnerships with Southside Virginia Community College and Mecklenburg County Public Schools. That application is geared towards career readiness, where they have identified the careers that are most in need in their community. They have a great partnership with Microsoft and other business and industry leaders in their community, and are really working hard to build a partnership where they're providing students with tangible and durable skills to be fully prepared for the workforce in their region. The other application currently under consideration right now is a partnership with Virginia Commonwealth University and Code RVA High School. Both of those applications received initial review by the Standing Committee on June 5th and currently are open for public comment. Second reading on those applications will take place on July the 7th. VCU and Code RVA have a vision to be able to expand the computer science offerings that are available to students currently in their high school to students in grades K through 12, as well as providing a pipeline for teacher residency and training future teachers to be able to support computer science in the classrooms across the Commonwealth. So 2 really strong applications currently under consideration. We have 16 grants that have already been awarded. We have 2 additional grants that are currently under review by our VDOE staff. So as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of interest in this across the Commonwealth. Some of the work that we're doing certainly is to support interest across the Commonwealth. We want to recognize that there are business leaders, industry leaders, institutes of higher ed, local school divisions who are interested in potentially considering a lab school application. So we want to provide a lot of information for those future applicants. We really work hard to keep our website updated and accurate so that individuals have the information that they need to consider a future application. So we have a very robust website, and we really work hard to keep that updated. We have also an interactive map. So Anyone who's interested in creating an application can see where lab schools are, if there's one in their vicinity. If there's not, if there's a void there in my community, that may be a great opportunity for me to do something to support students and families in that local school division. Frequently asked questions are on our website as well. But ultimately, as a staff, what we have committed to at the DOE is to provide ongoing and strong technical assistance for all of our applicants. We're committed to supporting them along the way. We want to be that guide by the side and that coach that's going to allow our applicants ultimately to have a quality application for consideration by the standing committee. One of the things that we've worked hard on just in the past 2 months is creating a transparent process for our applicants and a process that is going to create quality in the application process. As staff, again, we want to support, we want to guide, we want to counsel, but ultimately, when it gets to the point in time of presenting an applicant to the standing committee for their consideration, we want to make sure that is an extremely strong application. There are a lot of things that we do as staff, provide coaching and support, and ultimately, if an initial application is not ready for review by the standing committee, we send that back to the applicant with coaching, feedback, and opportunities for improvement to make it even stronger than it is. And so it starts with an initial presentation to the standing committee. The standing committee can go in a bunch of different directions. They can move that on to second reading. They can open up for public comment, or they can say that the application is not ready and needs to be baked in the oven for a little bit longer. But ultimately, they may choose to pass that on to second reading and then potentially review that by the State Board of Education. So this graphic there's a lot on this page and it's hard to see, but ultimately the goal is to move forward with quality applications that we can all be very, very proud of and will provide a great opportunity and experiences for students and their families and their local communities. Standing Committee and the State Board does have a forecast of a schedule. It's listed here on this slide, and an additional meeting has been added on July the 7th to hear the 2 applications that are currently open for public comment. We'll see what the Standing Committee chooses to do at that second reading. They may or may not send those forward to the State Board for their ultimate consideration, but that's where we are in this point in time right now with those 2 applications. So really proud of the work that we are doing to support our applicants. A lot of great ideas are out in the Commonwealth. A lot of folks are working together to generate ideas to provide really great experiences for students and local communities. Thankful to be a part of the work, and I'm available at any time to come back and answer any questions that you may have and give you continual updates as this process evolves in the future.
Senator Deeds and then Senator Norman.
These charts are hard to look at. I want to go back to slide 2. Where are the operating lab schools now?
There are currently no lab schools that are operating now. The 2 under consideration are here in Richmond and in Southside in Mecklenburg County. Yes, the other dots that you see, Senator Deeds, are applicants that have been approved for a planning grant or considering a planning grant. So we have 16 that are currently going through the process of determining whether or not they want to move forward with a full application. So 2 that are currently in the pipeline right now.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Senator Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Returning to Mecklenburg in Richmond, based on what you know today, what is a reasonable projection on when those schools might open?
Potentially, if VCU and Code RVA move through the process, they are slated to open in the fall of this year. That possibility exists. They're fully prepared if they receive all the approvals to open in the fall of the year with the lab school. Mecklenburg County is slated to open in the 2024-2025 school year, if approved.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Locke and then, yes.
Senator Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, if approved and let's take the VCU Code RVA, if they open this fall, how much funding is given to that applicant for opening?
Yeah, so each applicant has identified a financial plan. It's a 5-year financial plan, and that particular applicant has more state funding on the front end of that 5-year plan, ultimately to become more and more sustainable in the future with additional resources and less dependent on state funds. I don't have the exact figure in front of me for year 1 through 5, but they have transitioned from state funding to other funding over the course of that 5-year period. There's a total of $75 million appropriated in all for the ongoing operational cost of all of the lab schools.
For all lab schools?
For all lab schools, yes, ma'am.
Second question, Madam.
Yes, Senator Locke.
And once that 5-year period is up, how is the school then sustained?
Yeah. So there are a multitude of models there. Code RVA is, their proposal is to utilize not only state funding, but funding from local school divisions, as well as other grant funds to sustain their own operations ongoing. Code RVA has been in existence now for 5 or 6 years under a different model, and they have a track record of sustainability over those course of the past several years. And so, again, a variety of funding sources to accomplish that goal, but recognizing that the potential for state funds to dry up and run out is there, and so they need to think about alternative sources in the future for funding.
Okay, Senator, oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
I do.
Okay.
Madam Chair, so there's an assumption.
Well, currently, there's $75 million appropriated for the lab schools. Ultimately, any additional decisions would have to be made by the governing body in the future, and so that's a future decision that would have to be made. Right now, they're recognizing that decisions have been made in the past for $75 million, but there's no guarantee of a future.
And actually, I think we should be very clear that there's disagreement on what the money can be spent for. It's very clear in the budget, which overrides the code, that it can only go to public 4-year institutions.
Right.
And the administration appears to have overreached by going into other types of institutions, schools. Yes, Senator Ruff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To better understand the process,
sure.
If both of these approved at the July meeting, why is there a 1-year delay in the Mecklenburg?
Mecklenburg, that was part of their application. They realized that they need additional time to plan and prepare, develop curriculum, solicit, recruit the students that need to be involved in the school. So their horizon is a little bit longer for planning purposes. Code RVA has an established program and process and governance structure and has been running similar to a lab school for several years in the past, so they are more ready to implement than Mecklenburg County.
Madam Chairman, the Mecklenburg and Microsoft work very closely together in this.
Yes.
Are businesses in other parts of the state working closely with their school systems?
Yes, sir. So we had a symposium in May where we had 130 attendees, and we had representatives from a variety of different business and industry sectors. We had construction, we had aviation, we had computer science, we had it was really a robust conversation. We had higher ed, we had K-12 education, in that we were able to connect business leaders with educators, and it was really a positive conversation. I had a webinar yesterday where I met with the president of Eastern Virginia Community College, who is working in a collaboration with Virginia Space, NASA, and some other organizations on the Eastern Shore. And so really excited to support that work, and so those collaborations are happening in communities across the Commonwealth.
Madam Chairman, one final question.
Yes.
Can you tell us what all these checks and X's and blues and oranges mean on this stuff?
I am happy to send a easier to read graphic to all of you or your team so that you can pull it up and blow it up and see exactly what it is. It is difficult to see. Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
And April, as I look at the agenda, that completes it. Okay, there being no further business, the committee will rise.